At the beginning of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we have a scene of Zack entering into the Sector 5 slums. Upon seeing Aerith on the television, he leaves Cloud with a stranger and runs off to find her. Now if you pay close attention, you will notice he actually runs off in the wrong direction. He goes towards Aerith's house, which is further under the plate, but in the next scene he is running towards Midgar's outer wall, which is in the opposite direction. We can verify this with Remake if we stand in the same spot and look around. We can see that he goes in the wrong direction. Now this scene is most certainly a mistake by the developers, and has nothing to do with what I want to talk about today, but because I saw it, I want to share it with you. This first section with Zack, however, is relevant to what I want to say. At the end of this section he rescues Aerith, and we see the white materia falls from her hair. Aerith had previously shown us this white materia in Chapter 8 of Remake, but the game doesn't actually render it. And in Rebirth, Aerith has lost it and it is replaced with a clear materia. So we can ask, how does Aerith's white materia end up in Zack's alternative world? The answer is that it is due to the ending of Remake. So let me show you how. But before we get there, we need to understand the Whispers. These ever-divisive ghosts play such an important role in the story, and people are still trying to figure them out. We can understand Whispers a lot better by looking at weapons. In Tifa's lifestream sequence, we can see that the Whispers and the weapons fight alongside each other. When Tifa reports this experience to the rest of the crew, she says the lifestream is fighting Sephiroth and winning.
Some nasty looking black whispers going up against the planet in the lifestream. And these whispers are with Sephiroth, right?
Yeah, at least that's how it looked to me while I was in there.
And? Any idea who was winning? Could you tell?
The planet. The lifestream. Us.
So from this scene we can deduce that the Whispers belong to a category of creatures that emerge from the lifestream in a way that the weapons do so. Weapons exist to defend the planet, but Whispers exist to arbitrate fate. So a lot of our discussion of what the Whispers do revolves around an understanding of what fate is. But what the word fate or destiny mean in the re-trilogy is not easy to discern, because the games are not exactly clear, and I think there are multiple usages of the term. Nanaki in Chapter 17 of Remake says fate or destiny is the flow of the great river that is the planet, from inception to oblivion. So the destiny that the Whispers arbitrate is connected with the concept of the planet. Now there is a misconception about the Whispers. Many people think that the giant Whisper we fight at the end of Remake is the singular arbiter of fate, and beating him means that we have changed fate or destiny. Even Barrett, when he sees him, says, "Now that looks more like an arbiter of fate to me." But this interpretation is wrong. First, Barrett has no idea what he's talking about, so please don't listen to him. Secondly, Nanaki calls the individual Whispers the arbiters of fate. And he repeats this in Rebirth when describing the Whispers to Cait Sith. He says the small Whispers are the arbiters of fate. He's already seen the big one, but he doesn't refer to it as the arbiter of fate. And the most important is that the enemy description of the Whisper Harbinger says explicitly that the many Whispers are the arbiters of fate. So you should not think that this giant Whisper Harbinger is the sole arbiter of fate, and our interpretation of its presence and what happens when we beat it needs to change and adjust to this idea. The Whisper Harbinger is called an accretion of Whispers. An accretion is when a bunch of small things gather together into one big thing, which is exactly what we see play out. We see a bunch of Whispers gather together with a purple cloud and form the Whisper Harbinger. It is, in some ways, a singularity of all the Whispers, a single representation of the whole. And this purple cloud here is actually a really important detail, and I need to direct you to a theory video made by Victor Maloof. He talks about the color coding of Final Fantasy VII and their association with major actors. It's around a 2-hour, 5-minute mark. And at around 2 hours, 5 minutes and 50 seconds, he talks about how Jenova's energy is purple. And let's take his analysis as true. The Whisper Harbinger then is a combination of Whispers and the purple cloud, meaning it is a manifestation of Jenova in some way. This isn't the only time that we see Whispers in connection with Jenova and Sephiroth. In Rebirth we see black Whispers that have a purple-blue orb appear in their hood. Now I'm colorblind so it looks blue to me, but I suspect it's actually purple. These are the Whispers that are expressly controlled by Sephiroth. And in contrast, we see white whispers, which are agents of the planet, of fate, who help the weapons fight against Sephiroth and are associated with Aerith. But did you know that this distinction also exists in Remake? If we keep the color purple in mind, we see that the whispers have two different colors. There are mysterious specters, which are a lighter shade of grey, which you can see in their enemy intel page. They often appear dark because they appear in dark settings, but if you actually take a close look at their color, they are lighter grey. And then we have the enigmatic specters, which have an obvious shade of purple. Both in the enemy intel page and in-game you can see this coloration quite clearly. This implies, quite strongly, that the Jenova-Sephiroth influence is mingled together with the planet's presence through the whispers. And this is not something that only occurs after the end of Remake, it exists prior to it as well. And did you realize that we only fight whispers twice in FF7 Remake? Once in Chapter 4 and once in Chapter 12. And then, I guess, at the end of the game, but that's not what I'm really talking about. Both times that we fight whispers, they are headed by the purple-hued enigmatic specters. So, isn't it really interesting that when we fight whispers, we fight the purple-colored ones that are connected with Jenova-Sephiroth? This means that we need to look at Jenova-Sephiroth's influence through the whispers in these scenes. Is it the planet that wants to hurt Jesse so that Cloud can go on the mission? Or is it Sephiroth? Is it the planet who wants to stop the plate from falling? Or is it Sephiroth? And we need to have a clear delineation about who is wanting what through the whispers. This also helps to explain why Sephiroth is connected with the whispers sometimes, but not all the time. There is a mingling of the two opposing lifestream elements together, and those are also seen through the whispers. And what I find super weird about all of this is that Sephiroth is the one who talks about fate and destiny the most. And when Aerith talks about the future, she always emphasizes human choice and freedom. She says the future is a blank page, even if it has been written. That attitude towards fate is so different from Sephiroth. The imposition of fate upon individuals, especially at the end of Remake, is treated as a kind of slavery, and that fits way better with Sephiroth's desire to rule over everyone and everything. But if Aerith is more in tune with the planet, then her perspective, which is naturally predisposed to the freedom of people's desires and hopes, seems very weird to connect with the concept of fate. So when we fight fate at the end of Remake, are we fighting the planet in the lifestream, or are we fighting Sephiroth and Jenova? Now, Sephiroth actually has a pretty strong connection with fate. From the Nibelheim flashback, we can see that he believes that the planet belongs to Jenova, and by birthright, it belongs to him as well. He believes that he has been chosen to rule over the planet with Jenova at his side. And when we meet Sephiroth at the end of Remake, the theme that plays is called Those Chosen by the Planet. Destiny Comes. That title track is super interesting. Sephiroth's speech in the Temple of the Ancients also includes the similar theme. He will rule over the planet as is his birthright. He will reunite the many worlds of the lifestream and control them. And this is perhaps best understood as him controlling and bringing everyone's desires and hopes underneath his own dominion. Fate and destiny are also connected with the visions of meteor falling on the planet. When they see visions of the meteor, Tifa says, "No, this can't be our future," implying that this is the fate or destiny they are fighting against. But fate and destiny are also connected with the planet. When we see the black whispers at the end of Rebirth, Cloud says, these aren't associated with fate or the planet, they're with Sephiroth. You have a distinction between fate and Sephiroth, and Cloud associates it with the planet. So I think it's super important to point out, fate and destiny seem to have dual meanings. Or rather, the way Sephiroth sees fate and the way Aerith and the planet sees fate are talking about two separate concepts, and they use the same words to talk about both of them. An additional way that we could think about fate or destiny has to do with the Jenova cells in Cloud's body. When they were put into his body, Jenova's will enslaves him, it controls him, it forces him to act in certain ways, and it poisons him. It draws him away to the reunion. So we could talk about Jenova as the fate or destiny imposed upon Cloud, and his struggle against destiny is his struggle against Jenova. And so we can postulate Jenova in fate in those connected ways, where his freedom is freedom from Jenova and it is to be his own person. But I don't think Remake is really forthcoming with how it uses the terms fate or destiny, and so the way in which whispers arbitrate between the two is also not entirely clear either. But for the moment, we can just say that the whispers' arbitration of fate and destiny fits within this larger conflict between Jenova's Sephiroth and the planet, and they are used by both sides to arbitrate their wills or to express their wills. So when we look at the ending of Remake, let's talk about a number of moments. First, when we are on the highway, the Whispers are not concerned with our party as we escape. They whirl around the Shinra building while we drive away. Now, the soundtrack actually has a song called The Whirl of Whispers, and it describes their circumambulating motion around the building. When we meet Sephiroth, the Whispers don't come to us right away. It is only when Cloud says, "The world won't end today, but you will," that the Whispers come rushing in towards us.
The world won't end today. But you. You will.
Listen.
Destiny comes.
This is, in some ways, the Whispers arbitrating between the desires of Jenova, or the desires of Sephiroth, who wants to impose his will, and Cloud, who rejects it. And when the Whispers come our way, Sephiroth says, "Destiny comes." And then we hear this loud cry. Aerith will then later explain, what you heard just now were the voices of those who lived and died and returned to the planet. They are howling in pain. Sephiroth calls this destiny. For him, it seems that destiny involves the people who return to the planet being corrupted by spite and pain. And that's what he sees as a desirable outcome, while Aerith thinks it is a lamentable one. And I think it's really interesting that the Whispers only intervene when Cloud rejects Sephiroth, and Sephiroth's portal is only made after that. So this whole ending of Remake is a competition and an arbitration of the desires between Cloud and Sephiroth, or Cloud and Party and Sephiroth. And then we see a vision of Zack, which takes place roughly 4 or 5 days prior to Remake's finale. Remember that Zack dies, and then Cloud goes to Midgar, and then the bombing run happens. So this is a vision into the past. But after we zoom out of Zack's vision, we zoom out of Aerith's face, indicating that Aerith is the one who receives the vision about Zack, and it could be Sephiroth baiting Aerith. But before we move on into the portal, this section on the bridge where Aerith talks to the party, and then the party decides to go after Sephiroth, fulfills the same function that it does in the original game. The surrounding spectacle around it has changed, but the function is still there. Our main cast finds motivation to go against Sephiroth and fight against him and stop him, and so they leave Midgar, just in a different way than they did originally. And we come to the most important part of Remake's finale. When Aerith purifies Sephiroth's portal and our cast go through it, we emerge on the other side, back in Midgar on the highway. Remake did not have the language to describe this, but Rebirth does. Remake's finale occurs in a paralleled lifestream world, like the ones that we see Zack and Biggs later on in Rebirth. In fact, it might even be the same one that Zack is in. Remake's finale does not occur in the physical world, and I'm kind of tipping my hand here by suggesting that these parallel worlds are actually in the lifestream. And I want to suggest that the finale actually happens in the lifestream, and it is a representation of people's hopes and dreams and desires. Now, the lifestream is connected with people's hopes and desires, not just their memories. Biggs says as much in Remake.
Mako's the essence of life itself, of memory and hope. It's not something you burn in a reactor just to keep the lights on. Hell no.
The lifestream encompasses desires, that which look into the future and exist in the present, and also that pretty famous NPC from Cosmo Canyon also repeats this idea. The lifestream is not only made up of memories of the past, but hopes and desires for the future. I do suspect that this is a retcon that the Remake trilogy has made about the lifestream. I'm not sure that the original Final Fantasy VII or any of the compilations clarify that the lifestream peers into the futures through hopes and desires. Or if you watch videos that analyze the lifestream, I don't think it's a major part of the community's understanding that the lifestream peers into the future. Not until Rebirth anyway. But I do think Remake and Rebirth are operating on this conceptual change. So if the lifestream has a future-facing component, then people who interact with the lifestream can interact with the future. And interacting with the lifestream draws out people's hopes and desires. And so we see Cloud having visions of the future, we see Aerith giving knowledge and glimpses of the future through the lifestream, and when we break the Whisper Harbinger apart, we get glimpses of the future through the lifestream. And even the appearance of the Advent Children's desires manifest themselves in the current timeline. They are here to defend the future that they desire. All of this seems possible if the lifestream has a future-facing component, which the games seem to suggest that it does. And thus, our battle in the lifestream against the Whisper Harbinger and Sephiroth is a battle of our hopes and our desires and of our memories. At the ending of the original game, the cast say to Sephiroth, "Now we will show you our memories." So to suggest that the ending of Remake is a competition of desires in the lifestream fits pretty well with what the original Final Fantasy VII was. Now, there's another reason to suggest why this ending takes place in the lifestream, and that is because it occurs pretty much above Aerith's church. Aerith's church is one of the few places in Midgar with a strong connection to the lifestream. That's what Aerith means when she says this place has a kind of power about it. As we walk along the debris, she says, "How could I hate Midgar with all these desires flowing into something greater," which is also a connection of desires with the lifestream. When we escape from the Shinra building in the original Final Fantasy VII, we end on the highway section. We descend down to the outskirts of Midgar before we go off to Kalm. This screen is right next to Aerith's church. If we go past Aerith's church, we can arrive at the same location. Her church is right next to the outskirts, where we end the highway section. We can see this repeated in Rebirth, where we see the broken remains of the motor boss outside of the Sector 5 slums. So when we move through the portal and go backwards, and then up into the sky, we are pretty much above the Sector 5 slums and Aerith's church, and in a location where the lifestream manifests itself. We can also point out, although I don't think it's really proof, but I'll include it anyway, when Aerith gives Cloud the white materia, she pushes him out of that lifestream world in her church. So we have a precedent of a portal into the lifestream being manifested in connection with Aerith's church. But I don't think it's proof, I think it's just kind of interesting. So what would it mean for the remake ending to be a contest of desires between Sephiroth and the group? Well, this actually is a bit more literal than you might be expecting, but the remake is fighting against the desire to summon Meteor, wound the planet, and absorb the lifestream. The ending takes place in a purple cloud above Midgar, which is then blocked by a swarm of whispers which represent the lifestream. This is how Meteor is depicted at the end of the original Final Fantasy VII. It descends upon Midgar from above and the lifestream goes to block it. Secondly, a Harbinger is a messenger of someone else who's going to arrive. It is a herald. And so we should be thinking about the Whisper Harbinger as a messenger who comes in front of someone else. And that someone else is Sephiroth's desire. And Sephiroth desires to summon Meteor, and we literally fight the herald of that desire in the same place where the meteor strikes Midgar. Additionally, we also see tornadoes that cause devastating destruction resulting from Remake's finale. We see this in Rebirth as well. This destruction does not occur in the original game until Midgar gets ravaged by the tornadoes at the end when Meteor falls on it. We even see that in the original, Shinra building gets dislodged from its place, and in the beginning of Rebirth, we see the same thing has happened as well. And so I think on a very literal level, we are fighting a manifestation of Sephiroth's desire to summon Meteor and destroy Midgar, wound the planet so that he can absorb the lifestream. And when we beat the Whisper Harbinger, we see this exact scene play out. We go into a pure white lifestream space that is then ruptured by Sephiroth's desire. The meteor comes in, the whispers whirl around it, Sephiroth absorbs them all and descends as a god. This is the desire that Sephiroth wants, the fate or destiny that he says is coming, and this is who we fight. And when we beat Sephiroth, we have this mysterious glow, which could be the purification of this lifestream world that we see in Zack's vision, or the creation of a new one that gets reunited with the worlds in Rebirth, so there it's open to interpretation. But after that, we go through this strange space before landing at the edge of creation. This sequence too is a repetition of something that occurs in the original game. After beating Sephiroth, Cloud stays behind and goes through the same tunnel sequence and fights Sephiroth in a dark space. So we can say that the Edge of Creation is a reimagining and expansion of that part of the ending of the original Final Fantasy VII. whether that's Cloud's mind, or whether that's the lifestream, or it's something else. The visuals of the blue and the red star formations or galaxies, they're not galaxies, they're like star formations, can be partially explained. The red star formation uses the visuals of Sefer Sephiroth's attack supernova, and it can be understood as a depiction of Sephiroth's and Genova's desires, while the blue one could be the desires of the planet which are fighting against Genova Sephiroth. This would match Rebirth's visual cue of the sky, which is said to represent the world of Meteor and the world of the planet. I don't have a great explanation of Sephiroth's words that say that which lies ahead does not yet exist, but if these are representations of competing desires, then the outcome of those desires is not yet reality, and in between them stands Cloud. His fate is important for the fate of the wider world. And we can come back here. So how does the white materia end up in Zack's world? Well, that's answered by saying we go through a lifestream portal and we fight the ending of Remake in the lifestream. We beat Sephiroth at the end, but we also ended up falling for his trap. By going through the portal, we bring the white materia out of the physical world and somewhere into the lifestream. When we return to the physical world, it is without the white materia, and so that's why the white materia is found in Zack's lifestream world. But what's more, without the white materia, Aerith lacks the knowledge and memories that are associated with it, since materia are a collection of memories and knowledge. And Aerith loses that knowledge in Rebirth. So when we see her without this knowledge in Rebirth, we can understand it is due to her losing the white materia to this other world. But this is all I have for this video. Thank you for watching. Check out the sources in the description and comment below, and even subscribe to the channel if that's what you want. Other than that, see ya!